The next deformer we're going to look at is blend shape. And blend shape is specifically designed to perform morphing tasks, and it's mostly used for animating characters, like, for example, a face or facial gestures. But in this case, we're going to try it out by working with our lampshade. And to do this, I'm going to actually make a duplicate of this shade, and I'm going to move it to the side for you to see. So we have these two elements, and what we're going to do is we're going to morph one of them, and blend shape kind of creates this transition between this original form and then the morphed form. So let's start editing this shape. I'm going to kind of start pulling some of its vertices. Maybe to the side, and maybe I want to do this with symmetry so that it affects both sides equally. So I want to be on object X, and I'm going to pull these out, and you want to imagine this is going to be maybe your last frame of this morphing. So I want to have the last frame just kind of stretch my whole design out. I'll leave the base as is. And let's move this to the side. And blend shape works on the last object you selected. So the order of your selection is very important. So if I want this actual polygon to be the one that deforms and morphs, I would first select this object, and then lastly I would select this one. And that way it's going to do the blend shape over the location of my existing lampshade. And so again, you go to deform and blend shape. And let's look at our attributes now. You can see there's a new tab called blend shape. And let's deselect this. And if I move the weights, you'll see that now my original form starts to morph and adapt to the second form. I will post examples of blend shape being used more for characters, facial expressions, so you can see the potential of this deformer. Some things to keep in mind with blend shape is that you have to work off of the same geometry. So you can't create, for example, a cube and ask blend shape to morph from this cube to this form, because it has to have the same number of vertices and the same kind of topology. So for example, if we try doing this with this one, I'm going to delete the second one, and maybe I want to delete the history of this one. So I've deleted the blend shape function already. And let's try doing it like this so you can see how it doesn't work. Deform, blend shape. So you get an error down here saying no deformable objects are selected. So you need to make sure that you kind of work off of a duplicate form, and that's the one that you start to morph and edit. And a good thing to know also is that this blend shape can also be animated. Let's look at Lattice now. I'm going to turn my symmetry off. And the Lattice deformer allows you to control the deformation of complicated objects with fewer control points. than deforming the object directly. And Maya will create a lattice around the object that you select. And when you transform the influence lattice, the object inside it will get deformed too. So for this example, we can work off of the lampshade again, since it already has a complex geometry and many subdivisions. It's a great example. So let's go to deform and lattice. And let's look at the attributes for this. We can assign the number of divisions along its axes. And again, you don't want to have too many, because the whole point of lattice is being able to control a complex geometry with few subdivisions. And it works in the same logic as polygons work. And what you can do is you can right-click and select the points. And if you edit these points, it'll edit the shape inside of the lattice. We can lower the divisions too of our handle. So let's try 2 out. And again, select your lattice point, and you can pull this in and out. And so again, what I'm doing is I'm influencing the lattice, and the object inside of it is being deformed. So you could imagine stretching this shade out like this by using subdivision selections would be much more complicated. So now, for example, if I want to widen my shade, I only have to control this overall box instead of each subdivision. We're going to look at the wrap deformer now. And before I show you how to use it, I just want you to see what it does. I've basically created a low resolution geometry that is going to be the one that's going to be controlling my high res geometry. And this low res functions sort of like a cage. So it's similar to lattice in the way that you're using a low res geometry to control a higher res geometry, but in this case I've actually modeled the geometry that will be controlling it, whereas in lattice it automatically creates a cubic cage. And so you can see now that I can actually modify my lampshade just by altering this outer cage, and the way that it gets modified is much more different than actually having to go inside and modify each subdivision here. So let's go ahead and do this from the beginning. So again, what you would do is first model out your low res sphere, or whatever geometry you want to have controlling this other one. It could also be a different shape. So you're going to select your high res object first, and then your first low res object. And you want to make sure you do it in that order so that the wrap deformer actually affects this object and not this one. And with both selected in that order, you're going to go to deform and wrap. And so if I pull this, you can see that it's attracting my lampshade, right? Because it's almost like wrapping it and influencing it. But I want to show you how to attach this same geometry to a second low res geometry to be able to manipulate the lampshade. So you're going to again select first your high res object and then your low res object. And the second time you're going to go to deform, but instead of going to create wrap, you're going to go to edit, and then under edit you can go to wrap, add influence. And so now I have these two objects that are influencing my lampshade. So if I wanted to pull this up, I could start animating or deforming my lampshade this way. And same if I do this down. Again, I can scale or rotate and stretch my geometry like this. So there's plenty of ways that you could work with wrap to modify your base geometry or to even animate it. And if you ever wanted to remove the influence once you're done editing your object or animating it, you could always go back to selecting first your high res and then your low res. And then you can go to deform. This time again in edit, wrap, remove influence. And so you can see that I've kind of broken that influence and my lamp is back to its original state. And I'm going to do the same for the bottom now. Okay, so that was just to show you another way of animating or deforming a geometry.